momentous year of 1966 opened with a presidential report to the nation on the end of the first truce suspending air raids over North Vietnam. For 37 days, U.S. planes were grounded while American diplomats circled the globe in efforts to get the Hanoi government to the peace table. The decision to bring U.S. air might into action once again was summarized by Mr. Johnson.
This Monday morning in Vietnam, at my direction, after complete and thorough consultation and agreement with the government of South Vietnam, United States aircraft have resumed action in North Vietnam. Those who direct and supply the aggression really have no claim to immunity from military reply.
France took her place among the nuclear powers when she exploded her first atomic bomb on a lonely atoll in the South Pacific. France, under President Charles de Gaulle, defied public opinion by refusing to sign the Test Ban Treaty. This was her answer. The mighty blast was considerably smaller than U.S. and Soviet tests, but it turned the Pacific sky white, and France scrawled a question mark in that sky. France retreated further and further into isolationism in 1966, a fact underscored by de Gaulle's eviction of NATO headquarters from French soil. The general decreed that NATO installations in France infringed on his nation's independence. De Gaulle, whose own troops were driven from the country, moved in as mediator in the Vietnamese War and conferred with UN Secretary General U Thant on the problem. But neither man was able to bring Hanoi to the peace table. De Gaulle traveled to the Soviet Union for a state visit. He was well received by the Russians. His avowed purpose, he said, was to establish a French-Soviet Union to help dissolve the Iron Curtain between East and West. Nothing divided the free world more in 1966 than the U.S. position in Vietnam. President Johnson defended his policies.
Unless we have the imagination to understand what is happening in the world, we may very well find ourselves, together with all of our friends, among the highly developed nations, but facing a series of explosive crises in which our military involvement is urgently at issue.
Pope Paul celebrated Mass in St. Peter's Square as he and 150,000 worshippers prayed for peace in Vietnam. The Pope pleaded with both sides to enter negotiations with honor and humanity. Death came to a beloved leader in India. 1 million people lined the streets of New Delhi to say farewell to Prime Minister Shastri. In keeping with Hindu custom, the body was cremated on the banks of the river Jumna. Shastri's death thrust Madam Indira Gandhi on the world scene when she succeeded Shastri as Prime Minister. Madam Gandhi is the daughter of Jawaharlal Nehru, India's first Prime Minister. Her appointment was a popular one with nations of both East and West. President Johnson welcomed her when she came to the United States on a state visit. Later in the year, President Johnson was off on a trip of his own, a 7-nation swing through the South Pacific and Southeast Asia, climaxed by a parley on the Vietnam War in Manila. The grand tour began on a light note in Hawaii, where the president got a traditional island welcome. In Hawaii, Mr. Johnson set the keynote of his tour when he said, "The United States is not prepared to win peace in Vietnam at the price of freedom." Traditional New Zealand reserve melted before the folksy approach of the tall Texan, who conferred with the government officials before flying on to Australia. Here there was another tumultuous welcome and more backing for the American position in Vietnam. The trip had become a personal triumph for the president by the time he arrived in Manila for the 7 Nations Summit Conference on the War. from Manila, he made a quick visit to the war zone itself, where he was greeted by Viet Premier Key and U.S. Commander General William Westmoreland. The visit was a pleasant surprise to the troops at Cam Ranh Bay, who took the salute of their commander-in-chief. The year 1966 saw the series of Gemini space probes end in a blaze of glory. Agena rockets were sent aloft to be target vehicles for pursuing Gemini spacecraft. With the Agena in orbit, a Gemini would be launched to give chase and perform intricate space maneuvers. Here is Gemini 9, crew Tom Stafford and Gene Cernan. Days in space, 3. Mileage, 1.25 million miles. Stafford and Cernan were frustrated in a docking attempt when a protective cover on the Agena failed to blow loose. They described the sight aptly. They told the ground it looked like an angry alligator rotating round. Here are Gemini 11 air views of the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden from 400 miles up. And from more than 500 miles aloft, India, Ceylon, and the Bay of Bengal. Richard Gordon and Charles Conrad were aboard Gemini 11, and they termed docking maneuvers routine. On this flight, it was astronaut Gordon who took a stroll in space, a 2-hour jaunt, as he sped through space at 17,000 miles an hour. With the two craft tethered together, Conrad and Gordon do a cartwheel to create the first artificial gravity in space. The last and most successful Gemini probe sent Gemini 12 aloft with James Lovell and Edwin Aldrin aboard to chase another orbiting Agena. Major Aldrin proved conclusively that man can work well in space. In all, he spent 5.5 hours outside Gemini and performed duties that will be necessary when a future moon vehicle links up with an Apollo mothership. When Gemini 12 ended her 3-day flight and went through a blazing re-entry, the United States could look back on a Gemini program that was a complete success, and it pushed man nearer the moon than he ever dreamed possible a few years ago. Space scientists had their most intimate look at the moon in 1966. From only 28 miles above the moon's surface, Lunar Orbiter scanned possible landing sites for Project Apollo astronauts and sent back photos called Pictures of the Century. Historic 1966 marked the first time man could study in detail what our astronauts will see tomorrow.